You can start getting a seat. We'll get started here in a couple minutes. Just start making your way to seated area.
Last night out of the blue, drifting off to the evening news. She said, honey, what would you do if you'd have never met me? I just laughed, said, I don't know. I could take a couple guesses though, and then tried to dig real deep. Said, darling, honestly, I do a lot more offshore fishing, probably eat more drive-through chicken, take a few strokes off my golf game. If I'd have never known your name, still be driving that old green Nova. I probably never would have heard of yoga, be a better football fan. But if I was a single man, alone and out there on the well, I'd be looking for a woman like you. Well, I could tell that got her attention, so I said, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I wouldn't trade a single day for 100 years the other way. She just smiled and rolled her eyes. She's heard all of my lines. I said, come on, girl, seriously. If I hadn't been so lucky, I'd be shooting pool in my bachelor pants, playing bass on my cover band, he's stocking up cold Bud Light over every Tuesday night. Yeah, I have a dirt bike in the shed, not one throw pillow on the bed. I keep my cash in a coffee can. But if I was a single man, alone and out there on the well, I'd be looking for a woman like you. She knows what a mess I'd be if I didn't have her here to be sure. I whispered in her ear, you know I get sick deep sea fishing. You make the best fried chicken. I gotta hope it's golf game. I love the sound of your name. I might miss that old green Nova, but I love watching you do yoga. I take a gold band on my hand over being a single man. 'Cause honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I'd never met a woman like you.
Hello. Hey, folks. So, how you doing? Good night. Hey, thanks for everyone for joining. You can come on over at some point. Find a lot of couches and stuff here as well. So, hey, tonight we got a great speaker, Colonel Hise Gibson. So I think some of you hopefully or maybe have read through the bio he has. But first and foremost, we just want to thank you for coming on behalf of PTC to speak to us, and also thank you for your service on behalf of PTC as well. A couple of thank yous too. So Megan Lang and Amanda Kinsey, they were the ones that really drove the ship here in regards to making this all happen. So thank you. Alrighty. So basically tonight, all we're talking about is operations and people, but really how do you make those thrive? But then specifically, how do veterans and how does the military mindset translate and help that actually become a reality? So really what we're going to be doing tonight is Hise will be talking a lot about various research he's been doing in regards to translating the military leadership that's been developed over eons and bringing it to a lot of the challenges that probably a lot of you face today, which is how do you help people thrive? And specifically, how can veterans coming into organizations and learning from them help you thrive as well? So excited to present him. If you haven't read his bio, so I'm going to run through a couple of the backgrounds. So you'll start blushing here pretty soon. So Hise holds a operations research degree from U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where he was class president as well as on the football team. He holds a master's degrees in operations from Naval Postgraduate School and Air Command and Staff College. And he holds a doctorate of business administration from Harvard Business School in technology and operations. So pretty qualified in a lot of ways. He's been in the military for over 20 years. He's a Black Hawk pilot by trade. He's commanded folks all over the world. Particularly, he got a Bronze Star medal for his service in Iraq and Afghanistan. So he's been around the block quite a bit. Currently, he serves as a professor at West Point, where he teaches in the System Engineering Department. And along with that, he also is a military fellow at the MIT Lincoln Labs and also a visiting scholar at HBS. He's an expert, as again, probably you could tell by that background, in operations and people management. And he works with a lot of companies and consulting to help them develop their organizations to thrive. So without further ado, I'll bring him up and hand over the floor. We will do Q&A at the end, so as you're hearing this, feel free to queue up some questions as well. But Hise Gibson.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone's clear that anything that I say is my opinion based on my research, my background, and is not a position of the Department of Defense. Disclaimer, just so we're clear. So when you go on Instagram and say, this random dude said this is what the Army's doing, no, I did not say that. Okay? So now that's out of the way. So first, I just want to set the stage. Let's go back a bit. So I'm going to take you back to a date. It was October 29th, 1999. Does anyone remember where they were in October of 1999? Only me. Okay. So since I remember, I'm going to tell you what happened on that day. I was a lieutenant, so a brand new, lieutenant person, like an early stage officer. I was in Korea. Okay, that's the freedom's frontier before Operation Iraqi Freedom in Afghanistan. Korea was freedom's frontier. So lieutenant with the keys to the car. My car was a Black Hawk. Okay, and this day I was going to take off and go do a random mission, just a normal mission on a Saturday with my S3, a major. So I'm a lieutenant with 2 years in. He is a major with 13 years in. But I'm in charge of the helicopter. When we're off the ground, I'm in charge. We're on the ground, he's in charge. That's how this worked. Okay? Because he didn't have the keys to the car like I did. Normal mission. We're just going to go down, pick up some parts, go down to the southern portion of Korea, drop some stuff off, and come back. Easy. Simple. Okay? We get to our place, our destination. I land, and one of my parts goes out. So I can't shut down my aircraft. I start running out of gas. Luckily, they get the gas station rolling. I get gas. Weather rolls in. Okay. If I shut down the aircraft, I'm stuck. And I don't know about you, but being stuck camping on some outpost with the Marine Corps was not my idea of fun at that moment. Okay. So I had to fly instruments, meaning fly in the clouds. But as a lieutenant who is in charge of the helicopter, I forgot some key pieces of material, like the books needed to fly instruments in the clouds. Okay? That's a big deal. I took off anyway because I could figure out how to get there. I could use other means to get myself north. Just don't go over into North Korea. That's all I had to worry about. Just don't do that. All right? So we go north. We find a hole in the clouds. We go through this hole in the clouds, and it's clear. We drop off the parts, and we've already coordinated to get a new Black Hawk. Okay? Coordinated to get a new one. So we're just going to go trade one in, pick up a new car, come back, and continue our mission. As we're flying, it's clear blue 22, so no cloud in the sky. the aircraft starts shaking like a washing machine. That's not good. So helicopters shake automatically, like your simulator back here that I tried to run on. But the shaking that we had indicated an emergency of some type. Okay? And so I take the controls, I land the aircraft in some random field in Korea. And so as it's rotating down, what we observe is that one of the rotor blades is dipping more than others. Okay? And when it finally stops, we realize that we're missing part of a blade. Here's the problem with that. A Black Hawk has 4 blades. It has to fly with 4 blades. If it only has 3 blades, that's a bad day. Okay? When we finally realized that that's what happened, the maintenance guys came out and said, "Good job, LT, Lieutenant. Had you kept flying, you would have been killed." It's like, well, that's good to know. You know. So had I kept flying and not reacted in the way in which I was trained, I wouldn't be here talking to you, hanging out in Boston. Okay? That would be what I would classify as like a crucible experience. Okay? That's a challenge. All right? No different than if I'm running a marathon, a Spartan race, or having a tough time at work. Okay? But that's a crucible experience. And that's one of many that anyone who has served in the military has like all the time. Any person who served has some random story like, oh, there we were that time in band camp that was really dangerous that day. All right? And so one thing to think about when you think about veterans is that, you know, people go through different crucibles. And what I'm curious about is how do crucibles or challenges accelerate human capital development? Okay? So anecdotally, we know that if you go through something tough, you're going to come out better on the other end, anecdotally. But in some early stage research that me and some colleagues at the Harvard Business School and at West Point are doing, we're able to figure out that no, really, empirically, we're able to show by going through crucibles, going through challenges, you actually facilitate accelerated human capital development. So it's not just some made up story. Okay? And so do I expect everyone to have a crucible like falling out of a helicopter or being in Iraq or Afghanistan? Absolutely not. Okay? Every one of us has a crucible. How many of you drove this morning into work? Did anyone miss a train? Did anyone miss a meeting? Was anyone late for a meeting? Did anyone think they had a WebEx of some type? You know what I mean? So all those things that really, you know, gets our goat, those are challenges. Have you been asked recently to do something that you're really not equipped to do? That's a challenge. But how you react to that is kind of what's important. How do you react to that challenge is what's important, which is what, just due to the nature of training, that occurs through anyone who has kind of hung out in a uniform of some type. And when we think about challenges or crucibles, let's think of it from reporters who are embedded with combat units. Let's think about NGOs who are on the continent of Africa who are facilitating saving others through getting them food. Again, I go back to the Spartan race. Has anyone done a Spartan race recently? I mean, that's a challenge. I got buddies who are trying to guilt me into going, and I refuse. You know, because I only go linear now. I don't like, you know, too much movement. All right? And so these are all challenges. If you remember what happened in 2005 in New Orleans, people were going through a crucible experience. Very similar to me flying Clear Blue 22 and falling out of the sky. Exact same thing over an extended period of time. My experience took about like 2 minutes. That experience took about a week, 2 weeks, and then longer for the whole city to recover. But people experienced that. We all went through the same thing. So the idea is that experiencing challenges makes you better. Again, anecdotally. But what we find is that those individuals who experience a crucible, and the crucible we define as combat experience, have greater than a 40% chance of being promoted early. So we have a lot of like metrics. And so those of us who understand our promotion system is very different than corporate. So for instance, what's your name? Kathleen. So if Kathleen's my boss, all right, and I did a great project, and Kathleen said, "Hey, good job. I want to get you. Am I going to get a promotion? Possibly, because you get a chance to decide. Okay. In my organization, my boss, his or her only way of deciding is an evaluation that they write, and a separate board decides. So me doing well or deploying before a board doesn't matter. It's always on the piece of paper. So it's almost like pure meritocracy. So we're able to show that if you have a crucible experience or a challenge in a position of authority, you have a greater chance of being promoted early. So we actually can see and say with confidence that human capital has been accelerated. Okay? But again, that doesn't mean all of you need to disappear and like get on a boat and be one of the 1,000 folks going to the Middle East right now. Okay? Trust me, we have folks who are trained for that. There's other things you can do that are challenges. And so what I'd like to share with you is that being part of the military adds value. Okay? And I'll share with you towards the end about how to unlock that value. Now let's use the use case of the Army. Okay, how does the Army create value? Well, as an operations person, I view the human capital development experience like a factory. Okay, that may be kind of mean and abstract. We bring in raw material. That is you. Some of your friends, somebody you know, somebody who you went to high school with, someone you might have went to college with, who someone's trying to find themselves. They find themselves at some random installation and decide to get duped by a recruiter and come to the Army. I didn't say that out loud, did I? Is this recorded? Yeah. So it's like a factory. So we bring raw material in, and through multiple touch points, we're a very high touch point model. We're able to actually create value. So think about your individual onboarding process, whatever that is. My wife just went through one. It took her a day. Like, that's it? That's all you get? So you've really indoctrinated those values of that corporation in that one day. That makes sense. We, over like 11 weeks, indoctrinate people with our values in everything that they do. So no matter where you go, what you do, you're constantly hearing them. You're being told them. So whether you like it or not, it becomes a part of you. So we are able to create value-based individuals through high touch points. And as you think about your onboarding process, if you really want individuals to really take on your individual values, you just can't stop when they show up to work. There's other things that must be done following that onboarding to truly get at that value. And so you got your folks who come in, and they have your values on the other end. Again, in our case, it's after about 11 weeks, plus advanced individual training, plus they come to a unit. And when I was a battalion commander in the 82nd Airborne Division, my folks would come into my organization, and I would have to onboard them too. And then at their lower levels, they're also being told these same things over and over again. And as a leader, you're getting traction when folks are parroting back to you what you say to them. So if you see any random soldier, they can repeat to you the Army values, whether they like it or not, because it's indoctrinated in you. And right or wrong, you kind of start to walk that way. You kind of start to understand loyalty has a meaning, duty has a meaning, selfless service has a meaning, and it's just a little bit different because you've experienced it in basic training, you've experienced it in your advanced training, you've experienced it in your organization. And so what we are able to do is create a value-based organization. But it's just like a factory. We bring people in. There's a work center. We mold the raw material. Does everyone make it through? Or do you discard some bad material? Yes, we discard bad material. Okay? And if you want a stat for you, that 80% of those who are eligible to come to the military can't. So 80% of the eligible population cannot come to the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps for some physical, mental, or other reasons. They can't make it through the program. So we have a very small population of folks who can actually come and serve. But once they're done, this is the best part for you. Normally, we got like a 5-year hitch. So if we talk about the service academies, I'll use that as a use case. if you go to West Point Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard Academy, we got a 5-year hitch. Thank you for paying your taxes. You pay for us to go to school. We hang out in the military for 5 years, and after 5 years, we can either stay or leave. It's a leave part that benefits you, not you, just you as an organization, okay? The leave part that benefits you. There's a lot of unlocked potential in those folks who depart because they have a lot of great skills that you can leverage within your own organization. And they come with different types of roles. So if you think about infantry, Marine, what was your job in the Marine Corps?
The ground intel officer.
So,
yeah, I was a platoon commander.
So as an intel person, and intelligence drives maneuver, as an intel officer will tell you, who's normally the smartest person in the room in any organization because they know everything that's going on. But also being a platoon commander, meaning and being in charge of people at the same time under extreme duress outside the wire, well, being in a combat role and a support role at the same time, that's a lot of skills that could be leveraged for an organization. If only we could translate that into something that we understand, which is normally the biggest challenge. How do we translate what is done in the military in a way that LinkedIn can pick up and that HR folks can understand is always a challenge, okay? So I would argue that transitioning veterans provide a great deal of value. Why? Because they've gone through these crucible experiences. Because they understand how to deal with stress. Because they are a value-based group of folks who, when put in a crisis or contentious situation, can respond in a manner in which they can provide value. And in most of our organizations outside of the Department of Defense, value is equated to revenue, right? Because that's different than the DoD. We don't really care about revenue. There's a budget, somebody signs it, we go and do stuff. So we don't really look at the revenue side of this. There's no balance sheet. Someone cares about a balance sheet. It's just normally not us who are in a uniform with a rifle forward deployed somewhere. Someone cares about a balance sheet. I want to get that on tape. Okay? It's just not me. All right? But when we think about all the value that individual or those individuals can bring, it directly equates to what happens on your balance sheet, right? Because in most organizations, and in my research and interviews with folks, everyone will say, people are my most important asset. That is said. Very few organizations actually are able to truly unlock that reality because of the balance sheet. If I can't tie something to ROI, then there's a challenge. And so that's a constant issue for most organizations as they think about how do we manage our people. So going back to overcoming challenges. Overcoming challenges creates value. Okay? If you think about this particular picture is one of the first female Army Rangers. Okay? Up until before she went through, women cannot go through Ranger School. Ranger School is a leadership school. It's 62 days. It's one of the most challenging schools in the Army, and it's a leadership school. I missed out on that leadership opportunity. Okay? There's 3 phases. It's extremely difficult, but she was one of the first women, and there's been many more since. So breaking glass ceilings is an understatement. So there's different kind of value that this particular officer, who was in the 82nd Airborne Division as an infantry company commander, can bring to an organization based on her ability to muscle through a lot of different things, right? So that's a pretty powerful picture. Now, how do you translate that in your organization? Is it on the sales floor? Is it in operations? She has an engineering degree from West Point, so she's pretty smart, okay? She's able to deal with crisis because she had to deal with a bunch of dudes for 62 days who were not the best smelling individuals and going up the mountains of Florida and the swamps of lower Georgia So there might be some resiliency and some grit that's just inherent in her as an individual that's not going to show up on LinkedIn. It's not going to be on a resume. And unless you look under the hood, you miss out on the opportunity to unlock potential that can drive the value in your organization. So as we think about the skills that are gained, I mean, it's kind of normal stuff. I mean, there's hard skills and soft skills. So I'll go back to my platoon commander. You know, you got to be a pretty good project manager to get through some things, you know, because you're given like some tasks, and then you got to figure out how to get it done. And most of us are trained to compartmentalize things, you know, so bucket things quickly, write it on the back of a cardboard box and execute, or to be able to execute off a sentence. An example of that is I had a leader who was a commander in Iraq. He brought his Stryker unit. Stryker is a motorized vehicle to Iraq as the first squadron to come to theater. And he was given one order. And I thought he was making this up. I thought he was pulling my leg. And then he showed me the email. Go north is all he was told. Like, okay. Like, come on, sir. That's all you were told? Yes. He showed it with his squadron of, like, vehicle stuff and was told just to go north and figure it out. That's it. So if you wonder, like, something you've seen on the movies, that can't be true. Believe me, the movies that you're watching today are actually decently accurate. We kind of just make stuff up. Just a little bit. Okay? Now, that individual who was given that order has 18 years of experience. So there's trust between the leader who's given him that order and an understanding that he can figure out what's required and where he needs to set up if he leverages the intel properly in order to execute a mission based on the assets that he has available. But all he needs is a sentence. So think about that. How many times have you come into work one day and you're like a leader person and you've gone to your team and just been able to give some guidance and you thought you were crystal clear? You thought you were clear. I mean, I nailed it. You like told them, do this, and you were able to walk away, go get an espresso, and then you like come back at the end of the day and are wondering what happened. Unfortunately, not everyone can operate off of just a sentence. So there may be a framework issue that exists that is just inherent within the military construct. That is just how folks operate. Okay? So how do you communicate? And then basic leadership. That's like a given. Leading people is kind of what we do. Okay? And it doesn't matter whether you're an officer or you're enlisted personnel. We're a leadership-based organization, no matter what service. No matter how much we joke about, you know, if I'm an Army guy, I'll joke with Navy guys. I'm an Army guy, I'll definitely joke with Air Force folks. And then I don't pay attention to the Coast Guard. Okay? Because they're in like the Department of Homeland Security. However, we're all leadership-based organizations. That's how we're wired. That's how we're built. So although we joke with each other about these things, there's no question that a naval officer can lead Army men. There's not a question that an Air Force officer can't come in and figure it out and get it done. And then all of us would just follow the Marine because they're going to just go straight in. All right? But we're leadership based. So these are hard skills that you can actually see versus the soft skills that you can't. Again, think about under the hood. Let's go back to the female ranger. The ability to work in teams under duress. That's kind of a big deal. The ability to critical think and problem solve. Or operate off of limited information and fill in the gaps. Or the ability to come back and ask more questions like, hey, can you clarify that? And not do it in a manner in which would just disrupt the flow of the leader who gave that order. Operate with cross-functional teams and ability to not only operate lateral but vertical. Okay? As a operations officer in Afghanistan, I was put out there to like build a base. Literally dropped in the dirt in Western Afghanistan, had to build an air base. I'm an Army helicopter pilot. I'm not an engineer. I am kind of a system engineer, but not like an engineer like build stuff. I like look at things and like integrate them, right? But that was the job. How do you go in, see a problem, communicate with other services, communicate with coalition leaders, Italians, Germans, Spaniards, in order to get resourcing to build a base in order to help support them. That's a skill that's not like on LinkedIn. And then being resilient. Perfect example, female ranger. Okay? That's just a given because everything's like hard. All right? Has anyone ever skydived? Of course you have. So no one's ever skydived, like just randomly just flunk. So did you have fun with that? You enjoyed it? Was it tandem? Okay. All right. It does count. It absolutely counts. I went to airborne school at 40, and airborne school is like, just throwing yourself out of an airplane 1,200 feet and like dropping. But when you're 40, your bones are a little bit different, right? They're not as resilient. But I had to go do it, so I had to figure it out. All right, it still hurts right now. All right, so, but again, these are things that aren't on LinkedIn. You're not going to see that on your Glassdoor description. All right, and so in order to think about how these crucial experiences integrate with this value, some research that I did in my dissertation was around this idea of T-shaped managers. Okay, and I would say probably most people in this room are a T-shaped person, and all that means is that you have depth. You have some depth. You came out of college with some kind of experience, or you got really good at something, or you went to some school and you became like, superhuman in this one thing, whatever that is. All right. And then at some point you gain some breadth, right? And so that's just the idea of T-shape. So you have some depth and some breadth. But what was missing is the area right in the middle, because when I heard that, I'm like, okay, this is awesome, depth and breadth. But how do I make this person? Is it serendipity? Is it just through our own divine anointing that we become T-shaped? And so I was very curious about this. And I think there's a variance. And what that means is that not all T's are the same. Some T's are big. Some T's are little. But organizations need both. And in order for organizations to get there, they have to be selfish. And think about your own organizations. I know there's talent acquisition folks in here. Do your organizations provide you any opportunity outside of the firm that doesn't benefit the firm directly or indirectly? What do you think? If I'm a firm, I'm investing in you. Am I going to invest in you for something that does not benefit me if I am the firm? What do you think? I'm a teacher, so it's like call and response. I'll just come over here. So what do you think? Would you invest in someone not being selfish as a firm?
I think yes, but it's always indirectly benefiting to the firm.
So that was not what I was looking for. The last part was, though. So if I think about the theory of resource-based view of the firm, meaning that I will not provide any resources to anybody if it doesn't benefit me, and humans are the resource, I can develop T-shaped people by providing them opportunities, some kind of training or development that will create over time some kind of different person. And I can do that through different experiences. Some of those experiences are tactical. Some of those experiences are very strategic. Okay, if you think of it on the top. Some of those experiences are inside the firm. Some of those experiences are outside the firm. So think about if I use PTC. So if you have an individual and you just kick them out to some hinterland organization just for like a month or two, that's an outside of the organizational experience. If you go and attach them some kind of strategic level engagement, that's a really outside the firm engagement. And you bring them back, well, that person's going to be a little bit different. And most likely a little bit better. And so some of the folks that we actually have are more operational. They're very good at their job. They may get a little broad over time, but it's very focused. Okay? And if we think about how human capital moves about right now, in order to grow, folks will leave your firm and go somewhere else. That's what happens in Silicon Valley in order to gain more experiences. But what we really want are adaptive people, folks who are more strategic. And that's the hope. I will say in the Army, we actually are able to create this. And sometimes, like most firms, we'll promote a lot of operational folks. folks who are really good. So we'll fight really good war fighters and then hope that they're going to be fantastic strategic thinkers. That's organizational fallacy. It happens. We're just like any big organization. But then we have to think about transactional opportunities. Folks are transactional. Then we have to think about folks who are also cross-functional. And I came up with this by going through like 345 different general officers' resumes, deconstructing all of their experiences and trying to understand what did they do. And that's the top 1% of the organization. 1% of a cohort of lieutenants will become general officers. So looking at that cohort was a good way of doing this. And so this translates directly to other organizations because you all have talent acquisition arms, you have chief learning officers or something, some kind of experiences that you can provide your workforce to kind of create this T-shaped person. But I would argue that your veterans already kind of come with this in hand. They come to you already in some kind of T-shaped configuration based on experience. And this is important because if you look at these two arrows, these are two major recessions. The one in 2001, 2002, like my wife was coming out of grad school in 2002, that was a great time to come out of grad school. That MBA went a long way in 2002. And then again in 2009. And so if we think about human capital development, the first thing to go in organizations is normally that learning piece. You normally downsize, and because we care about revenue, you forget about the people piece. And that worked in the 2000s. Why did it work? Because your ability to poach was still available to you. That was an available thing, you know. But now, as we look 10 years post, the ability to poach or get other talent or buy talent off the shelf is more challenged. And so in order to help bridge this gap, you have a group of unlocked talent that's coming out of the service like every day that can help bridge the gap from those leaders that may be an organization that, not through any fault of their own, we're not afforded the opportunity to really expand. So just something to think about. And so I would say the value that's gained by those veterans are able to provide some innovation, which directly equates to your bottom line. Because again, not the DoD, we don't really care about money in the same way, but in the corporate setting, is all about the dollars. Let's be completely transparent. And so finally, as you think about the real issue, is that it's a translation problem. Is there any HR folks in here? Great. I'll just stand right here. Okay. So you're speaking French. I'm speaking English. And there's a gaping hole between you and me. So I'm coming out of the service. I'm like some random officer. I got all these skills. And you're like, this makes no sense. And I can't even understand where I would put you. Because it doesn't make sense. Nothing you do makes sense. You're an intel guy who did some platoon leader thingy. I don't even know what those words mean. So it's a translation problem, right? That's all it is. And so through just looking under the hood and understanding the value that exists may help you better identify the unlocked talent that's come to your firm that you can then leverage and place and position across the firm, and not just in whatever you term your military arm is. Great example. I was talking to a CHRO and just giving a talk and asked, where would you put me? I always ask those folks that. I said, I would put you right there in business development with our military dudes. I'm like, really? That is interesting. But that is consistent because that's what's most comfortable, and it's easier to put people in boxes without looking deeper. Like my man with a Harvard Business School degree, he might be a little bit smarter and understands like business because he had to study it. I know some of these classes. I mean, it's kind of hard. So, but there's other things that these folks can do that, unfortunately, is a translation problem. And then it's on the organization to acknowledge, whoa, I missed some slides. Can you go back? I missed like my last three. Just want to do a recap for you. Let's see. All right, stop. Stop right there. Don't go. So right now the question is, so what now? What can you do? As an organization, as you think about these folks who have a lot of value that they can add to your organization, as an organization, you have to acknowledge that training required. So folks already come to you already trained, but there's a huge gaping hole in understanding. There's a lexicon difference. We're speaking different languages. So there's a gap. So not to say that someone can just like leave Fort Bragg, North Carolina, come up here to PTC and get it in. That's not what I'm saying. Actually, it is what I'm saying. However, there's a training gap. There's an understanding gap that exists. The organization has to understand that there's a onboarding requirement that's a little bit different, that it's just a translation problem. People don't need to sit in your organization for like a year before they figure it out, because the military veteran person has changed jobs every 12 months they've been in the service. So the requirement to quickly adjust, figure it out, and adapt is kind of part of the fiber of the individual. Okay? So training is kind of required. Understand the importance of laying out a pathway. And I've talked to a lot of startup founders, and I mean, it's flat and processes like kryptonite to startup and tech companies. However, just highlighting, here's a way to get to an end. It doesn't have to be the end, but at least the next two steps, because you got to think about the individual who's coming from a very linear-based organization. So just laying that out a little bit helps ease anxiety. And then finally, recognizing the importance of corporate culture. You know, I know it's trending, like culture and stuff, but it's really important. Why? Because you're dealing with individuals who the corporate culture was serve the nation. I don't know. It's kind of like a big deal. Serve the nation. It's kind of all you need. Bumper sticker, lock it up, walk away. Okay? But now, being in understanding the corporate culture and just, hey, you're dealing with 0.4% of the population. I mean, it's not a lot of folks. So through some of your ESGs, the ability to support this population, like any other, would enable you to better unlock that potential. So training, promotion pathway, and recognizing that the culture is different. That doesn't mean create something brand new, but just acknowledge it and understand it. The ability to unlock that that superpower that could really add value, which equates to revenue, is sitting there waiting for you if you just reach out and grab it. Okay? I'm going to end right now and open it up for any questions. And I'll answer anything. I'll give you my opinion. And I'll try to be brief. Yes, sir.
Oh, 1 second.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Hise. Question for you. For developing human capital within civilian organizations and businesses, the military, it's a very cultural basis. It's all about the day-to-day interactions, and it's the platoon leader and their first platoon sergeant. It's the NCO and his soldiers. It's the day-to-day cultural aspects. How much empirically can you say that contributes to the human capital development, and what's some of the better practices for either augmenting or improving that through direct training?
I think that's a great question. I think empirically we aren't able to show that because we're able to look at like by position. So, and because we understand the context, we know that all that's happening. It's also acknowledging that that same kind of reality is not resident in a corporate setting. It's just not. It's not how people are wired. You know, because, you know, I'll use the HR table. You all aren't going to like go out to the bar tonight and hang out and just, you know, because you got like lives and stuff that are like separate. Okay. However, through support groups, different things that organizations have, and like things like this open concept, which I have other comments on, allows for collaboration, which doesn't replicate exactly what's been experienced in the military in general, but it's close enough. And it's up to the veteran coming out to not expect the same thing. So it's a give and take. So the organization has a role, but the individual has a big role to kind of adjust themselves to the reality that exists. Yes, ma'am.
Looking at it from the other side, are there things that veterans coming out are looking for in job postings that they may stay away from, or that they're looking specifically for that are pitfalls you see organizations fall into?
Great question. So actually, because folks are transitioning out, be candid, we don't know what we're looking for. Because when you think about it, everything's laid out. I can open up a book. There's a book. It's called DA PAM 600-3. I can open it up to like aviation, and it tells me exactly what I'm doing. Now, I've deviated a lot from that, but there's like a roadmap. It's like there. And there's when I'm going to get promoted. And so because we're so accustomed to a linear pathway, never having to interview for a job until I know you just came from SAC, right? It's the Service Academy conference, vet conference. And so for those who went through this thing, that's probably the first time any of those individuals ever had to interview. And they probably made a resume up like that morning before because they never had to, because I don't interview. I just like show up and get assigned by somebody. So one, the biggest thing is just not knowing at all what you want or how to translate the experiences, and being ridiculously self-deprecating, because the culture of the organization is not one to say, look at me, or even self-advocate. It's not part of the culture. Just show up to work and get it in. Just go do it. Go pick up a Blackhawk, put it on your back, pick up some people, move. And then come back and you're done. You don't even talk about it. It's like just what you did that day. All right? So, I mean, those are challenges. So it's just on your end, it's acknowledging that this person you're talking to really doesn't know what they want. At least the first time. The second time they do. But that first time, no clue. On average. There are some who do, but most do not. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So to kind of help answer that question, I think a lot of veterans think that they might be underqualified. I think there's a lot of organizations out there right now, like the DAV, they host an annual or semi-annual job fair, and it kind of helps bridge that gap, I guess, where it basically shows face like large organizations who wouldn't necessarily be normally at like a veteran-friendly event. Like I've seen State Street, I've seen Fidelity. These are big organizations who are showing face at these big job fairs, and just like, look, like, what's your background? Like, what did you know in the military? And you all of a sudden get a highly qualified veteran applicant pool.
And I think the work for organizations is that you're dealing with like, think about raw talent like a diamond in the rough. You have to understand that the talent you're getting may not fit in the basket. So unless you get someone who's come out of a business school environment or some other master's environment, or someone, with a very specific degree, remember they didn't use their degree in the same way for like 5 years. They got all this other stuff. And so it's like almost like unlocked talent that the organization now has to figure out where to place it. It's almost like a trial and error situation that sometimes happens. Not always, but a lot of times.
First, thank you very much for your service. Really appreciate that, and thanks for being here tonight. As a manager at PTC, I've had an opportunity to lead and manage people with a military service background. I can attest to their growth trajectory being highly accelerated and moving to the next level and looking for that next challenge. Maybe a thought or some advice on, in a corporate culture, we can't always move people to the next job or the next thing as quickly as they might be ready. How do we temper or manage those expectations? Maybe some advice on that would be.
That's a good one, and I say that because I got a classmate of mine who's losing talent left and right because everyone can't be a director. You need like other folks to do other things, and I think communicating with the individual is key. So like all of us, we all want to know where we stand and how do we move to the next level, and an idea of when. For instance, if I work at Deloitte, I'm going to be like a consultant for like 5 years. I might be a manager for like 3 years. I'm going to be a senior manager for 3 years. I'll make upper partner after 13 on average, right? And so communicating very clearly that, yes, if you're doing well, the opportunity may exist, but there's also grade plate. I mean, that's Army terminology. So there's only so many billets available. So everybody can't be here because we got to pay you at this level. And so I think communicating that reality helps temper. And also, there's other ways to incentivize things. So giving people more responsibility just because they're equipped to do it helps. Giving more opportunities to be in strategic level positions because they've figured out all the other stuff helps. Because you're dealing with folks who are used to diversity of experiences. Again, most of us change jobs every 12 to 18 months. New jobs that we didn't know how to do before we showed up. Every job's a new one. I've never done the same thing twice in 22 years, except teach at West Point twice, but a different subject, with a 10-year gap, so it's different. But I think that's it. But communication is key.
So I know we talk a lot about what corporations can do. In terms of advice for veterans who are looking to get into, say, like a PTC, what do you give them in terms of the interview process and any tips or advice for them?
I think the biggest advice I would have for them is to get over yourself. Get over yourself. And what I mean by that is that we have a challenge with networking. I mean, it's almost like a dirty word versus just getting to know people. And it's not as transactional as we think initially, but I think that's a challenge for most folks who are in the service because it's not part of our culture. It's just not. We actually do it. We don't call it that, but we don't know how to do it well, and we don't follow up well. And so all these things kind of roll into an inability to really highlight yourself. And so I think get over yourself and work at networking in a more meaningful way. Being a little bit more seasoned, I really enjoy getting to know people at a more personal level because it helps me remember people in general. I like to follow up because I like meeting interesting people. So, but that's a personality trait. That's not like like a skill kind of thing. It's kind of who you are. But I think understanding and learning how to network is a key thing. And then also recognize that the veteran and the individual is actually more qualified than they think. And just because the job, what they're applying for, is not going to be their final job, and that's another issue. Folks come out of the military assuming that this next job is going to be my last one. That is so not the case. And understanding that is hard. Because remember, never had to apply for a job. Got an email from somebody, there's orders in it. They tell me where to go, when to leave, what time to be there. Never had to sell yourself because somebody else is placing you. So this whole dynamic is so different and challenging. And it takes about a year or 18 months for folks to figure it out. Which means on the organization, mentorship or sponsorship of some type is very important to help with individuals. Again, if you're trying to unlock that potential. Again, it sounds like a lot of an organization for a very small population, but if we break things down, 20% of your population provides 80% of the value in a firm. There's like paper written on it, going back to the 70s. It's like a real thing. And so there's an opportunity to leverage this very small population to unlock a lot of value to the firm, which is the only reason why it's important. It's all about the firm, not about the individual. Yes, sir.
Oh, real quick. So what advice do you give HR people? Because I've heard it myself, that you're too regimented and you're too structured.
Yes.
How do they get past that?
Yes. Absolutely. So we get past it because now by understanding that over the past 20 years, we've dropped individuals, great Americans, in the dirt around the globe. We've dropped individuals in the dirt around the globe. Perfect example. In 2003, I was a captain. The guy in charge of me was fired. I had to move an organization from Germany to Kuwait, from Kuwait to Baghdad, and start operations of a battalion. 7 years before I was supposed to be able to do that. So we've dropped individuals in the dirt around the globe, which means that actually those individuals are more adaptable. It's just, unfortunately, we might not present that way. And because we're doing human interaction, if I come up to you and I'm like, pretty buttoned up, stand up straight, stuff. Like, this guy's not going to fit. He is so not going to fit. Give me some flip-flops and a T-shirt, might fit, right? So it just takes some coaching. But under the hood, the individuals coming out are actually more adaptable than they've ever been. They've been required to operate off of minimal or no guidance and been told things like, go beat terrorism. Literally, that's a thing. And so, regimented, I can understand where that comes from, but I would argue that it's more the ability to manage and operate in a process and then understand now how to pivot when required from the process, because that's what's been required for the past 18 years. A little bit different than like my father-in-law's peers who were in Vietnam. Completely different war, completely different time period, completely different environment versus what's been going on for the past 18 years. Because I would argue that we have the most adaptable group of folks because we're asking them to do some wild stuff. But again, on average, we do not present that way. So I can understand where that comes from and why that is there. I've talked to many of HR person who gave me Vietnam era reasons as to how they view veterans in general and why they bring in folks 2 to 3 rungs below where they should be on purpose. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, ma'am. You had a question.
Thank you. Again, thank you for being here. So I think for PTC, we would like to help with that networking, and we really are trying to find ways to help work with the veterans community. And I think we're not finding a lot here in Massachusetts. So is there groups that we can tap into? Is there, like, what are some simple steps that we can take to help the veterans, but also help educate, like, our hiring managers on the opportunities, make these connections? And I mean, events like tonight, I think, are a start in going to the job fair, but we want to do more.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's the big thing. Because when you think about your firm and where are your gaps, where do they exist? You know, folks, you know, who are coming out of business schools, or folks who have gone through BU or MIT, who we send a lot of folks through this town for grad school, and so there's a lot of folks who are available who would love to come back. So, and you're right, there's not a lot of veterans just sitting in mass. I wonder why. If we look at where most of the folks who serve in the military come from, it's like 7 states, most using the South, like Texas. So I think going to events like conferences is a big one, but then also thinking about, does everyone need a college degree to do what's required in the firm? No, they do not. Okay? And so with that being the case, are there opportunities to leverage things like Soldier for Life that exist in the Army and other things, transitioning opportunities to bring in enlisted personnel who've gone through different boot camps of some type, who have some technical skills? I mean, I was talking to a gentleman who was a contractor who worked on GPS systems for the Army. You don't need a degree from West Point to get that in. You just need a good 2-year or 16-month course that you can come in and add value immediately in a firm. And so looking at that as another way. I always joke with my buddies in investment banking who are like at JP Morgan, like, I want 100,000 vets, like timeout. You want like 100,000 like Service Academy graduates. It's like, it's not the same thing, because there's already a certain level of quantitative acumen, and most likely come out of business schools or some kind of hardcore quant master's program that adds a different level of value. What I would say, there's a whole neglected group that exists that could also add value long-term to an organization if provided an opportunity, and also provided some way to partner with the services to enable that transition. And we've actually started that. I mean, for instance, events like in April, there was an Army Week Boston, where all of your Army National Guard arms and came together in Boston. They're going to do it again next year. It's a big thing. And so a lot of Army leadership shows up, and you're able to not only look at folks on active duty, but what about your guardsmen and reservists? The civilian soldiers, sales airmen and Marines who exist in this state, who when a disaster happens are at the ready for the state, who may want to transition. Perfect opportunity to leverage them who already live here. instead of trying to like get people who don't like the cold. I mean, I like Boston. It's cold up here. Are there any other questions at all?
So I actually attended a program management conference last week at BU, and one of the key takeaways that the instructors emphasized in that conference is the fact that a lot of hiring managers, when they look at candidates, between like someone who's really skilled at soft skills versus the technical skills, they would go with someone with the technical skills. So I know in the competency slides that you presented, there were a lot of soft skills that, you know, are inherently, you know, gathered from being a veteran in that sense. So I just want to encourage that. Don't be straight away, you know, when you look at a job description because you might not fulfill those technical skills, because at the end of the day, you can always learn those skills. So just wanted to kind of emphasize that based on what you were saying.
And that's a great point, because the issue, especially in this area, there's a huge talent pool for hardcore, hard skills. There's a huge group of folks that exist in this town and greater Boston area who can go in and, you know, build a software deck and, like, you know, code up at the ready. But you need people to lead those people. You need folks to lead teams. You need folks who can understand how to manage a process and understand how to get through bottlenecks and understand how to add value and understand how to communicate in a way in which not to diminish the value on a team, but still drive results at the same time. And those are all soft skills. And organizations, on average, especially doing those big dips over the past 20 years, have completely neglected that reality and assumed that only the hard skills are what's required. And then realize only later, when they have talent that they're trying to pull their directors or managing directors from, or they're trying to pull their next fill-in-the-blank chief, whatever, and they realize that, I don't know, Tom might not have the right disposition to really lead the organization. Jan might not have the right disposition to run this area. Might have just topped out, only because of the neglect of the soft skills. And so you have a group of folks who already kind of have those. Again, they're perceived as rigid. We are perceived as rigid, unadaptable, buttoned up, you know, and all these other things. Just, you know, tell folks coming to work in a T-shirt, they'll give them about a month, they'll figure it out. All right. You've been here for 6 weeks, right? I would have known you were a Marine until you told me. Just saying. Any final questions? There's no crazy questions. There's no bad questions. Anything on your mind? Going once? Going twice? Soul, thank you for your time. Okay.
So the drinks will be out for a little bit longer. Also, our CXC is open, so if you want to just check out and spin through some of our stuff, we have people that'll help you look through that. But thank you again. We tremendously appreciate you making time to come make time to speak with us tonight. I got a lot of value out of it. I'm sure a lot of folks did as well. So again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. What do you do? You're hiding under that beard.
Hiding where?
Hiding under
the beard. Yeah. Oh, so you're behind you at school.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. How are you?
Well, what are you doing here?
I work for a company called Carbon Black.
Okay.
Out of Moulton.
Yes.
Cybersecurity.
Yeah.